Tips, tips, tips. Everywhere you go, all we're hearing is discussion of tips. A lot of us are getting upset by it and just not tipping. But the problem is, who are you not tipping? People who don't truly deserve it, or people that do deserve it? But what if I told you there's people out there that get $2.15 an hour and they truly rely on tips? Do you feel any sympathy for them? There's a Cnbc video that came out that they're discussing how all this tipping culture is getting so toxic and what to do to get it fixed. I'm gonna react to it and I'm gonna give you my opinion in the end of the video. But for now, let's watch the video and let's see what they say, and maybe this could change your mind. But before I get there, guys, I please would appreciate it if you leave me a digital tip by hitting the like and the subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and with your help, it will definitely get me there. And one more thing, if there's anyone out there who works in the tipping industry, please share a story. Let me know how you're feeling right now with all this tip culture actually turning against you. Let's get to the video.
Lupe is a server at Cisco's restaurant, bakery, and bar in Austin, Texas. One of many workers around the country who makes the federal minimum wage for tipped workers, which is $2.13 an hour, a rate that's been in place since 1991.
There's no real economic theory that came up with $2.13 an hour. It's just no good reason that we haven't moved away from that.
There are about 5.5 million tipped workers in the United States.
$2.13 an hour since 1991. Can you imagine most of you guys out there getting the same pay for 1991? Do you know how hard it is to survive? Plenty of people are struggling with the pay they got in 2019 with the current inflation and everything right now being so high. I mean, I remember in the 1990s, gas was probably less than $1. Now, as we know, it's way more than that. So why? Why is the pay remain the same? And is it truly our responsibility to tip them well to get them caught up to the current times? Let's continue to watch, guys, because this is really interesting so far.
While restaurant owners across the country might want to be paying their employees higher wages, some, like the owner of Cisco's here in Austin, Texas, say they just simply can't afford to do so.
At the end of the day, if we were to increase our minimum wage internally, we have to then pass that off to the customer, which then likely probably tips less.
Wages across the economy, in the lower third of the economy, have been artificially suppressed for way too long. If you want people to work in these jobs, we have to pay them and not force them to rely on tips.
That's the argument I always hear. Once you start increasing the pay of the employees, then the price of the food doesn't go up. But it always is. And really, will we truly notice the difference of how much a burger cost a month ago compared to how much it costs today? Do you know how much money we spend on beer? It's ridiculously expensive. And on alcohol and everything else we order outside. We all know cooking home is cheaper than eating out, but that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the experience. You're paying for the fact you don't need to do your dishes. You're paying for the fact that you don't need to cook, and you probably suck as a chef, so you might as well have someone else prepare you an awesome meal. So I really don't understand that argument that much.
While some states have set their own minimum wages and the minimum wage for tipped workers is higher than the federal requirement, it's often not a living wage. 43 states have a lower minimum wage for tipped workers than non-tipped workers, meaning the percentage you're tapping on that tablet might not just be a thank you, great job, but instead, what brings that worker to making minimum wage.
You know, I never thought of it that way. Every time I tipped, it was because I appreciated the service. I decided whether it was 20%, 30%, based upon how awesome the service was. But I never really thought about they need this money for survival. That they're getting paid $2.13, which is not enough. But with that being said, there truly wasn't transparency. There never was that transparency. So I wonder why today, in this current environment, is such a big deal when this has been going on for years, possibly decades.
Here's how it works. The federal minimum wage is $7.25 per hour, but if you're a tipped worker, it's $2.13 per hour, also referred to as the sub-minimum wage. The difference between the two, $5.12, is called a tip credit. If a worker doesn't receive $5.12 an hour in tips, the employer is responsible for paying them that difference. That's the law.
Now that's interesting. I never knew they had a such thing of a tip credit that gets you up to $5.13. Woohoo! $5.13. That's still not a lot. And if you don't make enough tips to at least make $5 an hour, you are in the wrong industry. Or maybe you're not. Maybe people are just not tipping as much as they used to.
Lupe, who's been working at Cisco's for 10 years, makes the federal sub-minimum wage of $2.13 an hour. She works alongside her mother-in-law and cousin. She told us while there are days when she makes only $30 in tips, she typically makes about $200.
It's difficult knowing if somebody goes home not making a lot of money. You can have a good day at work being a banker, and you can have a bad day at work. Same goes for a pharmacist or anyone. Wages are fluid, but I think if you work hard, you're gonna get tipped more.
Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. If you work hard, you get tipped more. Because I've done Doordash, I've done Uber, and I've done Instacart. And let me tell you this, and I also read a lot of stuff in Reddit. People feel like they're tired of tipping. So what they do is they retaliate towards the person who's doing the delivery. And what they say, and I've seen plenty of people say this on Reddit, is, well, get a better job. And truthfully, getting a better job is not the problem. The problem is you. So if you had a job and you feel like you're not getting paid as much as the market usually pays for your position, how would you feel if your manager tells you, well, get a better job? You would hate it. That's a dumb answer. It's not a smart answer. And I don't like it when people say that. That's why for me, I always fight for fair wage. You gotta give people fair wage. You cannot just say get another job, because guess what? They do get another job, how these services are being rendered to you is something you're gonna continue to get. You probably will not get it anymore, and you probably won't get it at the great service that you do.
As of 2023, only 7 states have eliminated the sub-minimum wage. Saru Jayaraman is the founder and president of One Fair Wage, an organization seeking to end all sub-minimum wages in the country and increase the sustainability of wages and working conditions in the service sector.
These states actually have the same, or in many cases, higher restaurant industry business growth, small business growth rates, job growth rates in the restaurant industry, people of color owned business rates, women of color owned business rates, and tipping averages than the rest of the country.
Well, I will pump my brakes on that quite a bit. You see, because the reason why this probably works in some states is because obviously the population and the amount of wealth in the states are extremely high. We all know buying a burger in, say, New York or California is probably not the same price as somewhere like, say, in Idaho or Iowa. It might be cheaper. So just saying to increase the wage to a certain expense in certain places is probably not a great thing to do. Some places are small little mom and pop shops, and they're not able to absorb paying their employees a certain hourly rate. So to me, it's kind of complicated. It's not that easy. I would agree on that.
The nation's 3rd largest city and foodie capital, Chicago, is the latest to make the move.
It's complicated, and so is the definition of a tipped worker. An employee engaged in an occupation in which they customarily and regularly receive more than $30 a month in tips. Nowadays, that's a lot of people. And consumers aren't responding positively to this shift. In the second quarter of 2023, tipping at full-service restaurants fell to the lowest level since the start of the pandemic.
I don't think people realize how impactful that tip can be solely because they're so accustomed to tipping everywhere now. That's gonna hurt businesses. That's gonna hurt people who actually are working really, really hard and busting to pay for their families because you tipped down the street at your doctor's office or something random like that.
I do agree with what he's saying. It seems this tip culture has gotten out of hand. The reason being is because now you're being forced to tip everywhere you go. But we all know the bedrock of our society, which is some of these mom and pop restaurants, the bartenders, the hotel staff. They have been getting tipped forever, and they deserve it because they're giving you great service. But now for some reason, society's retaliating against everyone, and that does seem unfair.
Every day, Cisco's workers report their tips to management. That's how the tip credit obligation is monitored.
3, 2.
While that may work here, there's no governing body making sure that happens everywhere.
Nobody ever stops the clock and says, okay, let's sit down over all of their different and varying shifts. How much did they earn in tips?
From 2010 to 2019, more than 85% of investigated full-service restaurants and bars had some type of a violation, and 1 in 10 violated a Fair Labor Standards Act law, which establishes minimum wage, among other things. During those years, the government recovered nearly $115 million in back wages for all violations across the 2 industries, and about $114 million in back wages for FLSA violations specifically.
It does seem like the restaurant industry is shady. I don't want to say shady in the sense of they're doing some crooked type of business, but I'm saying shady in the way that they pay their employees. It seems like once an employee speaks out and wants to get a pay raise, they probably get canned because there's so many people out there that need a job and they'll come in, clean dishes, or whatever the case may be. But I want to say this as well. So many people start a business and they don't follow the proper steps. If you need to give this tip credit, then you need to have a good system in place to track all this, to ensure how much money the employees need to get paid. Now, I understand. That's highly time consuming, and that's another expense, like a bookkeeper, to keep record of this. every single day, and it seems like a manual process. Maybe that's a business someone should do to try to automate as much as possible. That way these companies don't gotta waste time on making sure the employees get the fair wage. Just a thought.
If you consider yourself a foodie, you know the name Danny Meyer, founder and executive chairman of Union Square Hospitality Group. In October 2015, he announced the elimination of tips at 13 of his New York City restaurants.
And these are, restaurant tabs that are $500 or $1,000 or more.
Then in 2020,
we actually reverted, and so now our dining room members do accept tips.
Meyer's just one of many restaurant owners who eliminated tipping over the years. And since then, nearly all have gone back to tipping.
There's a lot of feeling that you've taken out the wind of my sails of being a server. I can make a really great income largely because of my tips as a bartender or as a server.
Diners objected to the higher prices, and an estimated 30 to 40% of servers quit, often going to competing restaurants that kept tips.
Yeah, exactly what I said earlier. You see, there's not one size fits all for this issue, because there is a couple of levels when it comes to the restaurant industry. There's a top level, which everyone wants to get to, which is the fine restaurants that the tips are extremely high. And then there's the bottom level where they don't get as much tips and they truly rely on tips. And even the business is not as lucrative as the top level. So you cannot automatically increase the wages for the people on the bottom level and also on people on the top level, because they don't want to have a minimum pay. They want to get money off the tips because they're making a killing off the tips. So you don't want to punish one to reward the other. It seems like this is something each and every restaurant would need to handle their specific way.
According to advocates, if the tipped minimum wage was raised to $15, the price of food would only increase by 25 cents a day for the average American household. They believe the benefits will outweigh the 25-cent increase. Economists say what matters most is the overall cost-benefit analysis, and that what the country needs is a slow and steady reform process, no drastic changes.
So it seems that the tipping conversation is going to continue. No one wants to pay more for the meals. Do we know if that's true? First of all, do we know that every time a restaurant increases the price of the meal, that all of a sudden customers just stop showing up? It seems hard to believe. Now, in places where there's high density, that does make sense because your competition is large. So that I get. But if you're a small local restaurant, is someone really gonna abandon you and go to a restaurant a few miles away because of the price of the burger that they love and to be getting for such a long time? All of a sudden they're gonna say, no. The price of this burger went up 25 cents. I'm gonna travel. All that relationship I built with you, I'm gonna break it. That seems like something that's just not realistic. To me, it's also difficult because it's just like a commission-based job. The more you make on sales, the more you can make on commissions. And in these fine upper tier restaurants, some people are paying $200, $300, $400 a plate. Of course, the tip of 20% on $500 is gonna be a lot more. Compared to a smaller restaurant, then in order to get $500 worth of meals, they probably gotta serve 20 tables or 30 tables to even get to that point. So that's why it gets really tricky. Please leave a comment down below, because I would love to hear your opinions about this, because this is a conversation that's been going on for a while, and I would love to hear your opinion. And if you are someone out there who is currently living on tips, please share with me your story and let us know why we should continue to tip. Until next video, guys, peace.